me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Sorry. I think I have to update my Zoom, and of course I can't flipping remember my password. So I tried to change it, but whatever. I'm glad you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Doing well. Hey, Greg.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
So, Danny, did you like the meeting this morning?
Oh my God, I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really, I was just talking to John about it. I thought it was really good to see the process and see moving along nicely and hear some of the questions and all the features and everything that's going to be a part of it.
They
John
make it
and I-
so much more real.
yeah, much more tangible. And John
That's
was-
why I felt like it was good. And I apologize, guys, that I couldn't join this morning. Jack was being a little bit of a handful. But I just think it's helpful for Dania and I, not that we're ever going to be delivering any technical feedback, but I just think it does make it more tangible for us. And I think as we're having these conversations, and I think that as, you know, John asked a really good question in our Monday meeting, I think because I had been in a meeting with the developers, I understood why John asked the question the way he did.
Right.
So I think sometimes it's just helpful to listen and get an understanding of the context. So it's great and went well this morning.
Well, there's a lot still to be done, right, Greg? It seems like there's still a lot left to be done in terms of the phases. And then we were just talking about the timing of it. Obviously your timing was late March. So we just hope by then, early April, we have it all the kinks worked out, right, John?
Yeah, right.
That's going to be the tricky part, I think.
It definitely will be. Yeah. Also, I
Yeah,
think the
we're
testing
bound
is
to
going
run
to be
into
something
a
interesting.
couple surprises. Sorry, Greg, repeat that.
The testing is going to be interesting. As we get closer, we have to do a lot of quality testing to make sure everything's working right.
Now, how different so you're pretty much revamping the present website.
Totally, it's going to be replaced.
Replaced, got it. Okay, so they're supposed to be taking some ideas from that to
They're
import into
basically
this-
rebuilding it. They're rebuilding all the pages that we have there with a new look and feel in a new platform and with new web tools like JavaScript and
Okay.
other things going to be used that
Right.
weren't used before. So that's important. Also, we're adding a lot of other functionality that should work with different groups like athletic trainers and recruiters and coaches and that kind of stuff. So we still have some work to do there, but I think, yeah, it is going to expand the capabilities that we have now, for sure, by far. So, John, what were you
Those
saying?
teams are recruiting.
I'm just hoping that we don't end up with any last minute surprises that are really critical.
Right.
That kind of thing, that there's certain expectations that we have that aren't incorporated for some reason. A feature might be missing because either it wasn't clarified in the spec, or we didn't review it, or by the time we did review it, it came up too late in the development process to add things.
Yeah. I hear you.
That's the type of thing. So, we might not discover those until we go through testing and say, well, I did this invite thing and it works, but it didn't do this one thing I expected.
Right.
And then the question becomes, do they have time to incorporate that? If they do, fine, but if they don't, how do we handle that? Do we push it into the next phase, or do we extend the deliverable timing? So that's the kind of thing that I'm skeptical about how well that's all going to go.
And it's kind of unfortunately cross that bridge when you get there, right?
We're trying to snag it in the butt. I mean, one of the reasons why they gave us what's called an SRS, and
Right.
that has basically a good outline of what they're doing and throughout the site and the apps. And I'm in the middle of marking it up today. I did some yesterday, and I'll do more later on today. And those are things that clarify, hopefully fill in those blanks that we have to make sure are covered in this version. So John, if you can
Makes
like take
sense.
a shot at that too, it would help too. You know, just look at the SRS and mark it up.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we didn't really do, I mean, the software spec itself is good because it covers, you know, the requirements from a high level, but we could have something identified in the SRS that doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of the functionality. So in a really formal development process, you would have what are called functional requirements or a functional spec or a technical spec, something along those lines.
Sure.
Where, you know, the SRS says, you know, you have this event system. So they're building these event systems and how they display on the various screens, you know, your personal events, group events, public global events, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know, and that you can send an invitation to an event, you can RSVP to an event, you can collect a payment for an event. But the actual technical or functional requirements for that might be a list of 10, 20, 50, 100 different things have to happen. You know, updating these elements in the database, sending these kind of emails or these kind of notifications. So, you know, as an example, they might build it so that it just sends, you know, notifications to your phone or something like that through the app. And if we didn't specifically identify that we need an email
Right.
also,
Right.
you know, then you're not going to have that functionality. So we don't have anything like that. And that's where I see that there can be some contention later where it's like, okay, well, you built this, but it's not doing A, B, or C.
Right.
And they're going to say, well, yeah, we built it to the software spec. We didn't know it needed A, B, and C. So all we did was, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Right. Is there
So-
any way, John, to mitigate that? Like, is there,
it's challenging at this point because we didn't really take the time, we didn't really have the time to develop that kind of a spec. And it would also be somewhat challenging because we don't really have a full understanding of what exactly the current system does in the background.
Right.
Okay, so the developers do have access to the code, but they're not going line by line through the code to look for every single thing that it does.
Right.
I mean, otherwise it would take them, you know, another period of time for that kind of an analysis. So a lot of what we're doing is based on Greg's expectation and how he conveys the information to the developers. And of course, myself, with what little I know, I mean, I don't know the system as well as Greg does. I don't think anybody does. So, you know, if Greg happens to omit some little piece of what he wants it to do, and that never comes up in our conversation,
right.
that's where we might run into a challenge.
Yeah.
The way we address that in an attempt to mitigate that is to make sure that we start our testing early enough so that we can, you know, discover those things that are missing. Okay, it's not doing this, or it's doing it differently than we expect or want it to do. And we provide them that kind of feedback from our testing.
Right.
And then from there, of course, you run into the negotiation of, well, that's out of scope. We didn't recognize it. Okay, we can do that, but it's going to delay your deliverable. Is it critical enough that we can push it to the next phase, et cetera? So there are ways, but it just involves us being able to test the application well enough and thoroughly enough to identify those things.
Is
That's
there
the
a
way
way,
we handle that.
is there a way that we can test as they go? Like, for example, when they showed the grid with all the 7 uh, portions of the site that they were working on, one of it was the homepage, for example. So when the homepage is completed, is there any way we can test that portion of it while they work on the rest, instead of waiting for
Well,
all
there
to be done?
is, and if you recall, I did raise that this morning. When I had asked them that based on the different modules that they have, for example, the login, the sign up, the forgot password functionality, like that's pretty much close to done.
Okay.
So they should be able to release a version
Mhm.
that we can test that process. Are we getting the sign up emails? What happens if you sign up as a child? Are you getting the parental approval? You know, like we can test that probably within the next week or two, provided we have a test environment. We can't test on their environment because they're constantly doing new development, and they can break something or they change something, which means what I tested yesterday may not work the same way tomorrow.
Oh,
So, you know, the one of the next steps for me is to set up our new AWS, our new Amazon environment, which we talked about this morning, so that they can push a version of the code up there.
Got it.
And even though things may be broken throughout the site or not totally functional, we can go through the sign up process
mhm.
and the login process and the forgot password process and the parental approval process.
So
if
like
you're under
starting
13.
to like chip away basically.
Yeah, and then, you know, when they get the events module complete, and I don't know what the sequence is of how they're going to complete different modules, but when the events module is done, they can push a new version of everything up
Okay.
for us to test the events system. You know, can I create an event properly? Can I invite people? Can I RSVP? Does it show up on the calendars? Do I get notifications when an event is starting? Whatever type of things we want to look for and test. So, you know, yes is the answer to your question. We can begin to test certain pieces. And then by the time everything is done, we would still have to retest the login functionality, for
Yeah.
example,
Got it.
because they could have done something that broke it,
Yeah,
but you don't have to do as thorough a test. You just need to make sure, can I log in? Can I sign up? You don't have to really do as thorough of a test as we would do next week, for example.
Well, I think that we should anticipate, because this is life, that something's not going to work. And then I think, John, you had a really good point. It's just a matter of, based on what that issue is it a priority? Is it worth pushing things back? And I think that we should just anticipate that something inevitably is, we're going to have that conversation about one, if not a couple different things. And I think that, you know, I think it's kind of you cross that bridge when you get there, and we regroup and lean on Greg to make that decision of how important that piece is to the whole puzzle.
The important part
Yeah.
that I see is that we have a lot of little bridges instead of one big bridge. And that's what we're trying to do by seeing the modules and testing them as we go along.
Yeah, that seems smart.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're going to have to come up with our own kind of testing plan. For example, once I sign up with my email address, you know, I can't go through the sign up process again because I'm already a member. So if we want to thoroughly test the sign up process, we need a good number of people, and we need a good way to use like alternate email addresses.
Yep.
Okay, like the sign up process is I sign up and I'm going to get an email to verify my address. So I just can't use a fake email address because I have to be able to click the link in the email. So I have to actually receive that email. So, you know, we have to consider those kind of things. We're going to need a number of people to help us test. Now, if you have a Gmail address, one of the interesting things about Gmail is that if your email address is myname@gmail.com, you can put a period anywhere in that email address, and Gmail ignores those periods. So I could have m.yname@gmail, and that's the same as have just my name at gmail.com. I could put a dot between any of the letters. I could then put 2 dots. I could then put 3 dots. So they'll appear to the system to look like different email addresses, but yet they'll all go to your email address. So there are ways that we can kind of compensate for that.
Look at you with all these sneaky tricks.
I know, right?
Look at you, John.
That's his job. There's a
And then
part of us.
another thing that we want to do is as we test different things in the system, you know, Kelly, you might come up with 2 or 3 things that maybe they're not really a bug, but it's not working the way you want. Whatever the issue is, you're going to come up with a list of things you think are not right or need to be addressed. Dania is going to come up with some. Greg's going to come up with some. I'm going to come up with some. Some of we each identify will overlap. Okay, we'll all find similar issues or problems, whatever they are. And what we're going to want to do in order to streamline our testing process is we don't want everybody to start firing off to the development team one by one. So we'll have to have, you know, probably me or possibly Greg, but one of us will receive all of the issues that we identify and consolidate the list. And once we have that list, we may triage it on our own, but that list will then be provided one shot to the developers. When
I agree.
was
I think
doing-
that I like that we consolidated through you, because otherwise, yeah, we're going to look unprofessional. If we're
Yeah,
all
when
firing
I was doing development, the last thing I wanted was to get one email that says, "Oh, here's a bug," and then an hour later, "Oh, here's another bug." Then, you know, a couple hours later, here's another bug. Then tomorrow, I get 3 or 4 different emails through the day that here's other bugs, and it becomes challenging as a developer to, number one, manage that.
right.
And a lot of times, excuse me, the different bugs, issues, you might have a list of 4 issues. 3 of them might all be related to the same thing.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be firing them off one at a time to the development team. You want to
Well-
give them one kind of comprehensive list so that they can look at it. They'll be able to say, okay, well, these we can fix. These are in scope. These are bugs. These are things that are out of scope. These are things that are going to take too long to fit. You know, they'll be able to do their triage, and then we come to some agreement as to what they're going to do and how they're going to proceed.
Well, I think that this kind of goes to, and I'm glad we're all getting ourselves together. I think this kind of goes to each of us starting to really, as like the 4, with Greg really at the helm and us as being the other 3 pillars of the company. I think this starts to just, we're all kind of developing our roles as we go along. And I think that, you know, John, I think it makes so much sense that you're, you know, the point person and communicating with those guys. I mean, Dania and I can certainly use you as the point person, and, you know, we're definitely taking kind of like a second seat to this. But I think that this just goes to, as we're beginning to launch the company, we're all kind of developing our roles, and you're running point on all this. So, I mean, I'm happy to defer to you on all this stuff and send any feedback straight to you, and then you can present it to them how you best see fit.
Right.
What about within our network of coaches, parents, players, creating a small test group? Maybe about a handful of people in each group so that way when it is ready, we can have that be our testers. They're already aware of what we're trying to get accomplished. They know what we're looking for. So now when we push it to them, they're going to have a really in-depth kind of, eyes on everything.
That's valuable to a certain extent. I wouldn't do that when we do like the first pass of testing, like of individual modules. But at the end, when everything is, close
Yeah.
to or completely finished,
Yes.
we could do a more holistic test with some real users in the field. They would have to be, people that are committed to helping us test.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we want to or can provide some incentive to those people in some way, to encourage that. I would imagine most of these people have full-time responsibilities that,
Well,
taking,
we can,
a
we can
couple
lean on our
hours every day.
like, we
or
can lean on
something.
our family members,
Yeah,
like,
Yeah, I think we don't have to worry about incentives, or I think we can get
Yeah.
based on obviously our connections within the sports world. I think there are a lot of people out there who will be willing to assist us in trying to
and that's
develop.
and that's
100%.
quite possible.
Yeah.
The one thing that we would need to do, and as we, test each module, we can flush out the details, but we would need kind of to identify a specific testing plan. So when you approach, let's say, a coach at the college level somewhere, you can say, these are the specific things we want you to test and
Yeah.
focus on to make sure they work the way you
but
want.
I think,
So we would have to.
but I think Dana
develop
and I and Greg and probably you as well all have a network of people that we, as friends, mentors, former colleagues, are more than happy to help us out. Like, I wouldn't worry about that at all. And it'd be great to get some kind of really professionalized feedback on, like, hey, Dana goes to one of her fellow coaches and she tests the site out and the girl's like, it's really missing this, and this. Like, I stumbled here. Like, it might be something we might all miss because we're so deep into it, that I think that we all have those networks that we can rely on those folks to help us out.
And like you said, John, maybe at the tail end of everything, not necessarily in the initial stages of it.
Yeah,
Maybe-
like, as we're
maybe
getting
right-
closer.
as we're getting close to, a complete launch, I think. And not a large group, just a small sample size of from
Yeah.
each group, nothing too crazy, but anything that'll help. Like Kelly said, someone with a different set of eyes, just kind of.
Yeah, I just think we get so deep into things that sometimes it's easy to overlook things. And quite frankly, I'm not going to be as in the weeds as like a D1 coach who's actually trying to use it for whatever purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, the complete recruiting module, which is potentially a separate app, isn't going to be completely developed yet.
Right.
So there's certain things that we will be able to get these people, but that's where coming up with like the test plan, and we'll be able to flush that out as we test individual modules.
Cool.
Like when the entire, like, creating a new group or team or sport, etc., works, one of the things you'll want to do is, now mostly as far as creating a sport, that's something we're going to take on from an administrative level. But when you have someone who runs a league, let's say, the Big Ten, for example, right? And now one of the Big Ten schools, the basketball coach wants to create their team page. What are the steps that we want them to league page, et cetera, and what kind of functionality, can they post videos, can they post blogs, can they, invite people, like the players to the team or other staff members or whatever. So we'll be able to kind of flush out what it is, we want them to test, to give them kind of a framework of what we expect them to do through the testing, as well as providing us additional feedback on, well, I also wanted to do this and it didn't really work, or it didn't work the way I thought it should work, or whatever. So
we could be totally missing something and they'd be like, I really would have liked to see this. And again, we can always push it back to the next phase or whatever, but I do think that it would be helpful.
Yeah. And I think having that kind of a prepared framework for that test phase would be critical, because you don't want to just go up to these people and say, well, we want you to help test. They're going to say, okay. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want me to do?
Yep.
You know, there's going to be some specific things that we want them to try out.
Slight transition, but we're kind of on the topic, so I figured I'd bring it up. I know that we had a conversation, a couple of us, on Friday about building out this matrix for the recruiting and the coaching questions and stuff like that. And then it got brought up again on Monday. Leslie sent me a note afterwards and she was like, can I do it in this format? And I basically was like, I don't care what format you do it, just send me information. And I figured that I'll be able to put it together. Like, I think we have to kind of take a look at it. Like, it's so abstract at this point, because I think we're talking about, and John, I thought you had a great suggestion, which is, you know, I think that I'll kind of get all this information together. I'll take a stab at organizing it that way that makes sense to me in my head, and then I'll flip it over to you. But I just wanted to, you know, throw that out there, that by all means, we're working on building that. Greg has prioritized it. And I think that once I have the information and see the type of stuff I'm getting back from both myself, Dania, Greg, and Leslie, I'll put that together and then set up time with you. Again, as I think the conduit to the programmers, I'm going to put it together in a way that makes sense for me, but you have that brain that I don't, so that I think you'll be able to take a look at it and be like, you need to tweak the columns or the rows or tabs or whatever. So I just did want to touch on that, because I know it's something that, you know, Dania and I have been talking about it, and
I mean,
Leslie sent me some notes on it, and
I think the biggest thing is that if you have, you know, some sort of statistic or measurement or whatever, for a basketball player, you know, that same statistic or whatever would apply maybe to a football player or a tennis player. There are certain things that cross over different sports. And what we don't want to do is, you don't want to have something that says, you know, how fast do you run the 40-yard dash, for example,
in hockey,
which might apply to a football wide receiver, a football running back, a track star, something like that. And what you don't want is, you don't want 40-yard dash time in the database like 3 times.
right.
You know, you want it in there once, and you want to have a relationship that it belongs to this sport,
Yep.
and it belongs to this other sport. So from a technical aspect, you want to consolidate that information. And that, for me, you know, whether it comes in that format from Dania and Leslie and you, whatever, ultimately, when it goes to the developers, we kind of need to consolidate that.
100%. And that's why I felt like on the call, people were trying to overly complicate it, because I think that at the end of the day, to your point, John, we have to kind of stay on scope. And so I think we're going to be taking an initial stab at this and presenting it in a way that is as consolidated, as concise, and as streamlined as we possibly can for this first round. And then and again, we might prioritize, you know, we know we have an opportunity with Dania's crew. So I think we would prioritize basketball. Like, you know, I think that we don't need to start delving into sports that we have absolutely no contacts at, you know, and overly complicated when we haven't figured out an opportunity that we already have. So that was kind of my thought process, was like, if we know that we have an opportunity with Dania's crew, why wouldn't we prioritize basketball? If we know that Al is going to get us an opportunity with baseball, we should prioritize baseball. So that's kind of where my head was at. And by all means, I do think there's going to be, you know, height and weight. That's going to be something that every coach wants to know. But just so that we're all on the same page, I think everyone's sending me their info, and then I'm going to consolidate it. And then John, I'll set up time with you once I have something to work with, just to make sure that I'm not going down a rabbit hole in the wrong direction.
Right.
And just make sure that we're streamlining something to give over to the developers that doesn't ruffle any feathers.
Let me ask this question. From the call this morning, it seems like the recruiting app is kind of a ways away. So the metrics that you're talking about with all these measurements and stats, is that going to be used for the main part of the website? Like, at what point would somebody who creates a profile, a player that creates a profile, will they be putting that information on their profile, or is that information only necessary for the recruiting app? Because if that's the case, then we have
Good question.
time, Kelly, to kind of generate all that information and put it together in a nice, neat package. There's no
Yeah.
sense of urgency for getting it done now. So
No, it'll be part of the profile. So
Yeah, it starts
that
now.
when somebody signs up and says, I'm a basketball player, it'll present them with the opportunity to put in whatever metrics you need to
We've
put in.
deemed appropriate for
You know,
basketball.
whatever qualities, statistics, etc. So they'll be able to put in those that they know. Maybe they won't put them all in. Maybe they'll only put some. You got to figure high school kids aren't necessarily going to know all of those metrics.
right,
It's not like they go to a professional combine or something where they're getting tested on everything, right?
mhm,
So I'll populate, as a basketball player, I'll put in the things that I know. I may learn that I need to add more statistics and stuff, so I can populate them on an ongoing basis through my profile.
Would,
okay.
Now-
not to cut you off, John, would it be possible, and I'm just trying to maybe Band-Aid until we get like the formal recruiting app, but I wonder if there's a way that we can simplify this and say, these are, basic stats, whatever we deem the top 5 basic stats that are across all sports. And then is it possible that we could have a section that's anything else you'd like to present, or anything else you'd want a coach to know or a recruiter to know? And at that point, those individuals could customize their
I think
information?
you can.
So Kelly,
I
this is
think
how it should go, is that there should be next page, next page, next page. The first page is your basic stats, like how tall am I, how strong, but how
Okay.
tall, how, that kind of stuff. The next one should be performance general. How many, what's my bicep curl for 10 curls? What's my speed? What's my leg press? What's my bench press? That kind of stuff.
So
That's the second.
fitness goals. Okay.
Yeah. So then the third gets down to performance per sport.
Okay.
And I'm foreseeing tabs because kids play more than one sport, and they're going to try to get recruited for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 sports. So I foresee tabs. What are my baseball stats? What are my football stats? What are my basketball stats? And that's the point where we have to have more sport.
So I think I lost you on, I'm there with 1 and 2. Oh, I think you froze. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think in general, there's going to be some things that are basically global. Height and weight, for example, okay, are like global measurements that
Right.
aren't correlated to any one particular sport.
Right.
And then there's I don't know what Greg kind of conveyed as fitness things, like, how much can I bench press, whatever.
Right.
Now, I would say that the bench press is not necessarily that important for every sport. So I don't.
Well, I think
I
where
don't
my
know where that
question was
goes.
really lying, and Dania is
Right.
probably the best person to answer this. Don't you have to declare, like, by your sophomore year what sport you're getting recruited for?
No.
You don't have to do that?
No,
I had to
no.
do that when I,
No,
Oh, so
don't
you
have to-
can
don't
do-
have to
okay.
declare. No, I mean, some high Division I programs won't take multi-sport athletes. They want, if you're a basketball player, you come into Michigan State to play basketball.
okay, so that's, I
But
guess, where my
there's-
question was, because
yeah.
I was told I had to declare,
No,
but that was also because I was going top tier D1.
yeah, that's
Okay, so that
probably where
makes
you
sense.
meet that. That's probably where you'll meet that type of decision making. Probably if you're being highly recruited in any sport at a high level, they will ask you only to play that sport. Very few colleges allow multi-sport athletes. And the lower levels you go in terms of division, then you could play multiple sports without it being an issue because it's a non-scholarship athlete.
Got it.
Yeah,
Right.
unless you're like Bo Jackson or
Yeah.
Deion Sanders or
Yeah.
something.
Which we will obviously be having all of them on the UB universe.
In any case, I think, we have to kind of be careful about how we lay this out. And to Greg's point, Greg is kind of conveyed the visual representation of how we do this on the screens.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
getting it that way.
But as we put the data together, some data is going to be not related to any specific sport. It's kind of global. These are
Okay.
statistics and measurements that will show up no matter what sports I select. Then other measurements are going to be sport specific and might be only for one sport, could be for multiple sports. Okay. So that as we build our list, our matrix, that's how we're going to have to identify them is, these data model, the database will support them. And then once that's defined, you can move to kind of what Greg was explaining, whereas, okay, so the first tab is going to be kind of your global measurements, like your height, weight, reach, certain things like that. Then maybe there's something else that's global, but they're more fitness related.
Right.
And then the third tab or page would kind of be on a sport by sport basis.
Got it.
And I think in that case, if I have two sports, for example, but they both use a certain measurement for both sports, once I enter that measurement for sport A, basketball, if that measurement is also relevant for football, it's going to pick up that number that I've already entered. I'm not going to have to
Cool.
enter it a second time.
Okay.
And that'll eliminate, input errors and things like that.
Right.
So the visual representation of how you enter that data is kind of what Greg was going
Yeah, that
for.
made
And I
sense to
think-
me.
Right. Now, the other thing is, and Greg and I last week at one of our meetings, one of the outstanding things was we wanted to talk about the whole recruiting app. And in my opinion, I'm not sure that like an app for your phone is what we want for the recruiters. Okay. Because
Yeah.
when I'm doing searching for athletes that I want to attempt to recruit, or I want to investigate and study to see if it is someone I want to heavily recruit or not, I'm going to do searches based on whatever criteria I feel are important. And I'm going to get a list of 1,000 athletes. That's not going to do me any good on a phone.
Right. But I think that the only thing that, and I think Dania could probably talk to this a little bit more. I'm with you, John, on the whole. They're probably doing majority of their searching in XYZ on the desktop. What about the scouts that are like live in the field that need to input data, or, hey, you're at a game because you're watching player A, but then all of a sudden player B catches your eye and you want to look them up. Like, you're not going to have your desktop with you. So I think that those guys use their laptops. I don't know how much they're using their cell phones, but I can safely say scouts, at least in the hockey field, often show up looking for one player, end up recruiting another one. Like, they're taking notes on everything. Like, we might want to have a desktop, iPad / laptop capability there.
I
Okay.
agree
Yeah. See, I was
100%.
thinking, I was
Scouts in the
specifically
field, I
thinking
think,
more for
definitely
the-
use it.
Yeah, I was specifically thinking more of the search functionality. So perhaps I'm totally off base in how
I think
valuable a mobile app is.
I think it's
So
important.
so you're
Sorry, I'm just plugging in.
so you're right, but the one thing that I see is, and this will be important as we spec out the recruiter app, is maybe the recruiter app, like if I'm doing searches to pool athletes and their information, maybe that's desktop only, because of the volume of data I'd be searching for and filtering by. But if I'm in the field and I'm looking, I go to a basketball game, a high school basketball game, because there's a player that I think I want to recruit, and I'm watching him play and I'm following him through the season, and I want to make notes about that player, or I want to say, this person made 90% of his 3-point shots in this game, that kind of thing. To me, those are separate metrics that are not input by the athlete themselves or by a coach or something like that. So the recruiter basically would identify a member. So there'd be a relationship in the database between, that member's profile and the recruiter's data for that member. And I might record my own statistics for that person. Maybe as a recruiter, I meet with that one athlete privately somehow, and he does a couple things for me. Like, he shoots some baskets, or he does a couple of sprints for timing, whatever that kind of thing would be. And I, as the recruiter, will want to record that data or notes about that student. Those would be totally different and would never show up on the member's profile. So you're looking at a totally different set of data that the recruiter builds.
Dania, does that ever happen in basketball?
I think we're talking about two different things.
I do too.
I think we're talking about, and John is correct, and you're correct too. We're talking about recruiting database where there's just a list of players and positions and stats, and that any coach could, like you said, John, could go to their computer and say, hey, I'm looking for a guard in the class of 2022 between this height, whatever. All these names will pop up. What we normally would do is take those names now and put them in our recruiting app. So when we go watch them play, we now have their specific information inputted in the app. There's the transition between the database and the actual app. Sometimes your app is just information gathering. Like you're at a game and you see 3 players, you're gonna put their name, their height, their address from your packet that you're handed into your recruiting application on your phone.
Like a notes section almost.
Yes, yeah. So it's just two different things, but I see those points. My concern is not concern, but from a more of a technical perspective, I don't know if, like John's point, all that information needs to be in an app.
I agree.
I don't even think I don't know if it's possible or if it's necessary, but I think the apps that we use when we're on the road recruiting is sometimes just like blank,
it's notes,
questionnaire, and you're inputting that information, and then you have access to a recruiting database where you can sort out the type of player that you're looking for, and then gather that information. So there's two different things. I don't know if it can be one is my issue, if it needs to be one, but yes, that's why most people say that the software that they get isn't overall complete. That it satisfies different things. I don't know if anybody has ever created one software that is totally complete, that has all this information in it.
But it sounds like that's our opportunity.
But from what he's saying, it sounds like it can't be done, or there's no need.
Well, I didn't. If that's what I implied, that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
I can see where I go to the desktop site and I do my searching, and because the volume of data that I can search by and filter by, and the number of athletes I get in the resulting list is so large, it seems that you would do that specifically on the website. That wouldn't necessarily be part of the app. Maybe you can do some individual searches in the mobile app.
Yeah.
But your primary search, when you're doing these large searches and things, that's going to be done on the desktop on the computer. Now, maybe next to each name, there's a checkbox. So as I look through the list of athletes that come back in my search, say, here's one that I'm
Yes.
interested in. Here's one I'm
Yes.
interested
And that
in.
goes to your
Then I
app.
click a button
Yes.
and I
Yes.
click a button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It puts it in my recruiting list.
Yes. Yes.
And then when I go into my app, I can pull up my recruiting list.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can take notes or
And
something
then-
for each kid.
Yeah. And then if I go to a game to look at one of those people on my recruiting list,
Mm-hmm.
some other athlete surprises me and
Yeah.
interests me. Maybe there's a way for me to look him up and add
That's
him
what I'm asking.
as an individual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Perfect.
be searching for a whole list of 1,000 athletes. on the
That's
mobile
right.
app.
That's right.
So like part of the reason I brought this up is, and I have to chuckle because my father played 2 pro sports and was randomly recruited by Bear Bryant at Alabama to play football. My dad like played football to like not get in trouble. Like he had a scout there that was scouting another position. My dad had like a particularly amazing game, and my dad got a call by the recruiter like the next day. So I think that that's something that happens pretty standard. And I'm trying to think of my father scouted hockey for years, and that happened. That came up a lot. And he'd be standing in the stands, and he'd have his laptop, and he'd be there to see this player and come out of the game wanting this player. And so I just think that the good thing is it sounds like we have a little bit of time, to Dania's point earlier, to kind of work through the kinks of what this looks like. But it's, to me, such a fascinating conversation of, I think we have the opportunity to build the program that your colleagues need and check all these boxes of things that they're looking for. And I think conversations like this just help because we can get an understanding of actual functionality. To John's point, you're sitting in your desk, in your office, and this is how you're searching. This is what happens when you show up at the arena, and this is how you're going to start using it. And, you know, what's great is if we are phase 2 or phase 3 with the recruiting app, we certainly have time to have really flushed out conversations. And it sounds like the 3 of us, quite frankly, should get together and have a reoccurring recruiting app / desktop functionality conversation. Because I just think that I think we have an amazing opportunity here to make a ton of money as part of UB Sports. I think that if we could be known for that, I just think that that's amazing. I think it's an amazing opportunity.
Those are my thoughts. And to kind of circle back, Kelly, your question was, can someone kind of put in some free form? Like if we only ask X number of statistics in the
I was
profile.
asking
they're
that
like, well,
question, John, only to buy us a little bit of
Okay.
time. Like it was almost like,
Well, correct. Here's what I think. Yes, you can do that. So you
okay,
say, okay, here's all your stats and things that we collect and we'll save for you. Is there anything else you want to know? You can do that. And while this may be acceptable, the challenge is that it's free form. So when I put in, you know, what I call a certain stat, you might call something else.
okay, fair.
So there's no uniformity. You know, it's just total free form text. I'm going to say, yes, I want recruiters to know this, 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 and this, but there's no way to really search on that.
Okay,
Okay. So it's almost like taking a standardized test where you have all multiple choice, and then all of a sudden you have an essay where it's free form.
Mhm.
You physically have to read it individually.
I'm
to
with you. Because I think what
extract
I was
anything
thinking,
valuable.
where I was thinking was Dania's point on our call on Monday was based on the stats that kids provide. Coaches can see what position they are. Like if you're putting in certain stats, like I think it's pretty obvious what position you are. I was trying to kind of give us a shortcut. But I think that your point about searching, you know, let's say power play goals. You know, that might be something that a kid might put in PPG and somebody else might write out power play goals. And John, to your point, they wouldn't be searching the same thing. So I get that. That's a good answer to that question.
If the kid plays hockey and basketball, that could be points per game.
Right, totally. So that's why your
Right. So-
point of how they search it is very interesting.
Yes. So while there may be value in offering a free form field, is there something else you want a recruiter to know?
Mm.
You know, my first question is, would you do that on a sport by sport basis? Or would it just be one thing that you would have as goal that would show up for every sport? That's number one. So I would think you would do it as a sport by sport basis.
Agreed.
The second thing is because it is free form text, there's no uniformity from member to member to member as to how that data goes in there.
No,
It's-
agreed.
It's not searchable. So I would have to have some reason to be looking at that athlete's data to be able to see it.
No, you answered all my questions. You're right. It's not the right way. I was trying to think of a different approach, but you're totally right. And I think it's not the right way to go.
I mean, there could be value in allowing that. There could be value in allowing a free form. Is there anything else you want the recruiter to know? That's not
Yeah.
something that's a measurable stat, you know?
Yeah, that I think you
maybe
can look at
someone was-
personality.
Maybe someone was elected to be the captain of his team all 4 years, you know, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. You know, that might be a valuable piece of information, that I was elected the captain of a team all 4 years.
Or you were MVP, or
But-
you were most
State
improved player,
champion.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know, what awards have you won?
To me, that's that fourth level of profile
Yep.
development. Put that stuff in there. John,
Yeah,
can it be
so-
searchable by word? Can you have like state champion in gymnastics and have that show up as
Well,
a search field?
yeah, sure. You can make those free form fields searchable, and I can search for the word champion. But if somebody put in champ, I'm not going to find them.
Or like, to your
You
point,
know?
somebody put in MVP as opposed to most, you know, like as opposed to spelling it out. I think that
Yeah,
points.
so the answer is yes, you can make those searchable. I believe that they become less valuable if it's not a distinct element. Okay, so maybe you have to have a way where, you know, have you ever won an MVP award? Yes or no? You know, have you ever been on a state championship? Have you ever won a state championship? Yes or no? You know, things of that nature. Have you ever won a national championship?
So you have to
you know,
ask more
maybe-
targeted questions.
Yeah, you know, and I see those as potentially valuable. But yeah, so the bottom line is yes, you can have these free form fields so that I can allow a recruiter to see something about me that's not captured by just a generic statistic or metric or measurement.
Got it.
So yes, those might be valuable. Yes, they're searchable. Ultimately, how valuable are they going to be for the recruiter? It seems that I'd have to be interested in looking at an athlete first before I would see that stuff.
Hey, I have a question, and in listening to all of this, and I'm thinking with my coach's hat on, the UB player profiles, okay? I think, is there a way that we can distinguish, or a player can distinguish between wanting to be a recruitable athlete and not wanting to be a recruitable athlete, number one, and number two, if you are recruitable, if you say you want to be a recruitable athlete, then your information has to be present to these recruiters only at a certain age. Like, I don't want a fifth grader telling me that they want to be a recruitable athlete.
Yeah, good
So-
call. Dana.
So as they're building their player profile, this could be something for the developers initially. As you're building the player profiles, your age, once your age is identified, it should say, do you want to be recruited or not recruited for your sports? If they say, I mean, the age should
Yep.
then trigger that question. Because I don't want to receive, as a coach, go into the database and see, 1,500 player profiles for basketball, and I don't know which ones even want to be recruited or think of themselves
Yeah,
as
we
playing
can
at the next
certainly-
level.
Or in fifth grade.
Yeah,
we
you
can,
know,
we can certainly,
Good call,
we can
Dania.
certainly have, we can certainly have a toggle button that allows a member to say on a sport by sport basis,
yeah,
yes, I want to be recruited. No, I don't.
Right.
And that
Oh.
would be a sport by sport
Such a good call,
decision.
Dania.
yeah,
The other thing is you can also incorporate the age. But I would also say that there's probably some relationship to your graduating year. If you're a college recruiter, I'm more interested in the year you expect to graduate high school than your age.
well, I think to be recruited, if I'm going to start recruiting a player on the UB profile, I want to know they're 8th grade or above.
Yeah.
They're and not necessarily the year of grad, but that they're recruit, because I think we could actually only recruit you as of 8th grade. You can't recruit anybody below that anyway. But
Correct.
you don't want,
Well, okay, but there's a grade level which kind of loosely correlates to a graduation date.
true.
You know, a
yeah.
graduation.
Yeah,
like if
yeah,
I'm in eighth grade, you know, I'm
that's
graduate.
yeah, that's how we determine graduation,
And
yeah.
And then if you're looking at professional recruiting, like for professional football, you know, you can go into like the NFL draft as a junior. You can declare yourself eligible, right? So even the graduation date isn't always the key
It's
for
the
those
age.
kind of things,
Yeah,
et cetera. So there are some questions about, you know, making an athlete, a member, recruitable on a sport by sport basis.
right.
But then there's other data elements that correlate when will a recruiter be able to retrieve their data by
Right.
age, by graduation year, et cetera. So there's some combination of those things, whatever they are. You know, and that might vary sport by sport basis. I mean, Kobe Bryant went into the NBA without going
Right.
to college,
Well, that's what I think that we should think about it
right?
as opposed to graduation year. I think we should think about it by age, because the leagues also have different rules. And if we are thinking big picture here, that this could possibly be something that got picked up by professional leagues, the leagues have different rules of when you're allowed to
And
start
that-
recruiting
that
and
could be-
signing,
that
and
could be-
different.
That could be built into the system. We could
Okay.
have it so if you're recruiting football players, it's going to be dependent upon a graduation year. So if I graduate in 2022, I'm recruitable only in 2021 or 2022 or something.
Yeah.
I think
if
age,
it's
cover
basketball,
both bases, age and graduation year. So no
Yeah.
matter what coach, what
Yeah.
sport, you have
And-
both, you have both.
and I think the criteria for that could vary, so that if I'm recruiting for football, it'll use one set of criteria. But if I'm recruiting for basketball or hockey or baseball, they have different criteria on selecting the athletes that show up in your searches.
Yeah, Dania's got a good point though, because, and this is a very hockey specific thing, but I'm just throwing it out there. Canada does 5 years of high school. So when you say you're a senior, like you're a whole year older than every kid that's a senior in the United States. So I think that those two pieces of information are definitely
Both needed.
both
Yeah.
are needed. Both are definitely needed. Hey guys, I may have to bounce in a few minutes. Greg, our call quickly with Salesforce, is that a call or a Zoom?
It's a call. I'll send you the specs. It's happening at 2.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got the specs. I just want to double check. It looked like it was a call for me. So I just wanted to make sure that that's what it was.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm also checking out HubSpot. They have a whole free service for CRM. So that's interesting too to me. So I'm also going to talk to them just to see what they have. But, Salesforce, you're right, is industry standard. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, that was my other thing. So sorry guys that I'm going to bounce, because I'm on that call at 2:00 with Greg and I got to feed the baby.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
Yeah,
Bye guys. This has been an
All right,
awesome
bye-bye.
call.
I don't have anything else either. I mean,
No,
we're
I
kinda
think
good
once
for
we get
now.
closer to building that recruiting app, a lot more of this conversation would be pertinent. Agreed?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and I think this was valuable too. I mean,
Yeah.
I picked up a few things from this as well.
Great.
So
Okay,
yeah.
sounds good.
Thank you, people.
All right.
Great
All right,
call.
bye. Okay,
Okay,
bye-bye.
bye-bye.
ciao.
Yeah.